We've got now what I think is a really, really important session in if you were trying to understand the miners' strike and try and understand current disputes as well. The title Murduch Media and the miners. I've got three of my friends on the platform. Joe Henry was a South Kirby miner. Norma Strike was a Westo miner, and Paul Mason's a journalist, currently at Channel 4, was on Newsnight, and we worked together in the trade press many years ago. Propaganda, the role of the media was absolutely central to the strike. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the miners and then bring Paul in, and there's plenty of time for discussion after that. So we've got an hour and a half. Rose Hunter was going to be on the panel. I'm not sure if she's going to turn up or not, or if she wanted to stay in the Women Against Pit Closures session. As I said in the initial introduction, everybody wants to be in two places at once today, but here we are. So, Joe, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. Thank God Rose is not here. Is this working? Thank God that Rose is not here, because I want to start off with something controversial, something that I disagree with Rose about, and that's that we won the strike. We didn't win the strike. To me, we lost the strike. Yes, we fought valiantly. Yes, we were heroic. We took the political establishment to its limit, but we have to face facts. We lost. Our industries butchered, our jobs were stolen, and our communities were destroyed. Those are the facts, and we shouldn't pull any punches. I think the stakes are too high. I said in my last contribution at the last meeting that we have to learn the lessons, and it seems to me that one of the lessons we have to learn is that we have to know our enemy. And I think the miners' strike proved that the media are not on our side. And I could talk for 20-25 minutes, don't worry, Mike, I won't. But I just want to use Orgreave, that Steve Hamill referred to in the last session, as an example of how the media distort and lie. When I was at Orgreave, the things that I saw bore no resemblance to what I saw on the TV later that night. What I saw was police who were tooled up to the hilt, with helmets, with batons, with shields, knocking the hell out of miners. I saw policemen on horses with batons battering defenceless miners. And don't forget the iconic picture of a woman photographer putting her hands up in her air as she's about to hit by a South Yorkshire police officer. So I think we have to say that Orgreave was not just a physical battle, a physical confrontation between the police and the miners. There was also an ideological battle going on. And I think what we have to say is that the media totally distorted that picture. The sequence of events were reversed. The chronological order was switched to show that it was the miners stoning the police, particularly on the BBC television news. And it later came out, by the way, a year after the strike, or after the strike, when it didn't really matter, that footage was altered. In actual fact, it was the police that had started the trouble. It was the police that waded into miners, and it was the police horses that had charged into the pickets. And the pickets, when they were throwing stones, were only defending themselves. But I think you have to ask yourself, why is it that the media behaved so reprehensively on that day? And I think it was because the stakes were so high. Steve Hamill in the last meeting said it was a turning point. So it was. The ruling class and the media knew the importance of Orgreave, and they wanted to stop solidarity to the miners. And one of the ways they were going to stop solidarity to the miners was to discredit them, to show them as thugs. Not the police. The police were brave people defending coalmen's right to work. That was the message that I wanted to put over. Now, why did they want to do it? Why did they do that? They were terrified, weren't they? Because they knew in 1972 and 1974 it was solidarity that won for the miners. It was solidarity that got rid of the Heath government. It's wrong to say that the miners won in 72 and 74 by themselves. It's impossible. We couldn't have won it without solidarity from other workers. And to be honest, it was impossible to win the 1984 strike without solidarity from workers then. And the media knew it, and they had to discredit us. So the media wanted to divide and rule. So for me, what are the lessons? What can we take into today's struggle? And I think it's the crucial points in the class struggle. The media are prepared to lie and distort. Think about 1972, Bloody Sunday. What was the initial reportage? They took verbatim statements from the army and said that lots of the 26 unarmed civilians, Catholic nationalists, had weapons, when that was a lie. But that was the story that stuck for a long time. Coming further today, you look at Hillsborough. You know, the initial story went out that the people that caused the crush were drunken Liverpool miners who then went on to urinate on officers when they were trying to give fans the kiss of life. So it seems to me, whenever the political establishment is rocking, the media will come to their defence. And we have to remember that today. When we are told by the media that it's immigrants that's taking our jobs, when we're told that benefit claimants abusing benefits, we have to say, what about the tax dodgers? When the media is saying there's no alternative to the cuts, we have to say we can take it from the warmongers, we can take it from defence, take it from Trident nuclear refurbishment. I think we have to say as well that we live in the 7th richest nation in the country. We should demand the 7th highest living standards. But yet with 1 million using food banks, with hundreds of thousands of people in debt to loan sharks, while at the same time we see the demand for luxury goods like yachts and Rolls Royce increase. But we live in a land of plenty, but yet people have to make a choice whether or not to eat or to heat. And I think our task today as activists is to build a movement that can challenge austerity. And we have to do it wherever we find ourselves, whether it's on the streets, whether it's in the offices, or whether it's in the factories. We have to start building that movement now, and we have to recognise when that struggle comes who our enemy is, and that's the media.
What, you want me to speak?
Well, I don't want you to look pretty.
Oh, can I do that anyway? Right, the media. I'm from the northeast of England, and right at the very first day of the strike, I featured on the front page of the local evening newspaper, the Evening Chronicle, and the headline was "Strike by Name." And they did this article about me trying to stop lorries going to the local supply of coal, which was my first action in the miners' strike. The media, the press. We had a paper, well, still is a paper, unfortunately it didn't go out of business, called the Shields Gazette, which was the local evening paper, and it was against the miners from day one. Every time a miner was arrested, it was reported in terms of the miner being wrong and being rightfully arrested by the police, whatever it was. The local news, Tyne Tees Television, was the same. As a matter of fact, the first week of the strike, my pit was solid from day one. So on the Tuesday, that was 12th of March, we came out. On the 13th of March, we went down to Dordon Colliery and Seaham Colliery in Durham to picket them out, and things got a bit nasty, and there was bottles thrown, and a few bricks were thrown because the police came on the offensive. They were ready to protect those men going into work. When it was reported on the news, it was the miners who were wrong. The miners who were violent Nothing about the police being violent, the miners were violent. The next day, we went to Ellington Colliery in Northumberland to picket them out, and we did that. And when they reported it, they said that at Ellington Colliery there was a peaceful demonstration by striking miners who managed to persuade the local workforce to come out on strike. Great. But the scenes last night at Dordon Colliery were horrendous. The miners were out of order, blah, 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 blah. They went on and painted a picture. It was the same people. It was the same people at Ellington who'd been at Dordon. We had to respond in the way things were going. And can I just say about Orgreave, nothing to do with the media, but my personal view of Orgreave is it was a setup. It was a setup. When we got to Sheffield, along with lots of other coaches, we went to the NUM headquarters because we didn't know where Orgreave was. And there was about 100 policemen there, and they told us all to form up, and I don't know why we did, but we did. Then they marched us up the motorway, which they'd closed off, and there was a very loose, happy-go-lucky attitude towards the miners, and we went along and thought, well, this is all right, and we're walking up the motorway, and there's these few policemen watching us, and it was fine, until we came to this railway bridge, and we could hear this tremendous noise. And I remember getting to the top of the steps of that railway bridge and looking into the distance and just seeing these lines of, it's like a science fiction film or a scene from the Civil War, with all these police with horses and dogs lined up against the miners dressed in t-shirts and boots. That was the reality of Orgreave. Orgreave, we didn't go there with bricks and stones, but when it came to it, when they started to attacking us, what the media didn't report was the local residents in the houses were putting bricks out from their gardens out on the walls for us to throw at the police. That's fact. So back to the media. I had because I've got a stupid name, well, it's not stupid, but because my name's Strike, then as now, usually the first question is, but what's your real name? Well, you know, it's the name I was christened with, Norman Strike. I got a lot of publicity, you know, Strike by name, like I say. I actually kept a diary all the way through the strike, and I called that Strike by name, because I'm proud, and I'll always be proud until my dying day of being a striking miner. I wear the name The Enemy Within with pride. I wasn't the enemy within. Not really. I was fighting for what I believed in, but that's what she called us, and I wear that name with pride. In September of 1984, I was arrested by a snatch squad at Wearmouth Colliery because I've got a big mouth, and I was fed up with people just standing shouting scab at the buses going in, so I said, come on, let's get on the bloody road and charge into these buggers when they're standing here. And I organised a push. And we went onto the road, and a snatch squad came in and grabbed me, and I was arrested. And I was banned off every picket line in the British Isles, not to go within 200 metres of any NCB premises within the British Isles. And I got a journalist phoned me up from the New Musical Express and said, I want to do a story about the miners' strike. Can I come up and stay with you for a few days? I'd like to cover it. And I thought, a journalist from, I said, from the NME, the New Musical Express? He said, yeah. I said, yeah, all right then. And he said, I'll be getting off this bus at 10 o'clock. So I went to meet him, and I was expecting this hippie with long hair and stuff, you see, because that was my idea of a music journalist. And this skinhead with red boxing boots and a red Harrington jacket got off the bus. And I thought, I said, you Chris? He said, you Norman? I said, yeah. He said, oh, right. Turns out, he wasn't just a journalist. He wrote in the NME under the name X Moore, but he was also, as he told me later on, he said, I'm in a band. I said, oh, are you? He said, yeah. I said, what are you called? He said, the Redskins. I said, what, like the Indians? He said, no. He said, skinheads, but we're red. Communist skinheads. I said, oh, right. Oh, well, that's a good name. And he played us some of that music. I thought, well, this is good. I liked it. I liked it because it was, they just brought a single out called Keep On Keeping On. And it was dedicated to the miners. Yeah? Don't give up, keep on, keeping on. Anyway, he did a brilliant article which was published in January of '85 called Lives on the Line. He came to Durham and stayed with me and wrote his article about every aspect of the strike, interviewed strikers. He also went to Yorkshire, to Armthorpe, interviewed lads down there, and the whole thing was about 12 pages of a really good story. I've still got the copies at home. If I could find out how to use the bloody computer, I would scan them somewhere, but the pages are that big and the scanner's only that big, so I cannot work out how to do it. Through meeting the Redskins, through meeting Chris, I got another phone call in November from Chris saying, we're going on live television tomorrow night. We want you to come on and make a speech. I said, what do you mean live? He said, we're on the Tube. I said, oh, all right, it's nice to watch the Tube. I like the Tube. I thought, oh, great. So we met up. He said, look, we reckon we've got 20 seconds to make a speech before they suss out what you're doing and they cut you off. Fair enough. So we need to find what do we want to say in 20 seconds about the miners' strike. So it was like, there's been 2 miners killed in this strike, 10,000 arrests, and people are supporting us. And I made my speech, and it went down a storm. Went to the concert, to the studios. Stood in the background playing a tambourine along with the first. Yeah, I played live with the Redskins, mate, playing the tambourine. Then it comes to the finish one song, and they said, on strike, on percussion, Durham Miner. Came out, big applause in the audience, made me 20-second speech, went down a storm. Everybody was cheering and clapping, and I was really full of myself. Took me back afterwards, went to the green room. They have these places called the green room. Never knew nothing about them because I'm just a miner. We don't have green rooms at the pit. And went in the green room, and you can have anything you like to drink and you don't have to pay for it. And I've been on strike for 36 weeks and I can have anything I want to drink and I don't have to pay for it. Triple Southern Comfort there, mates. And I'll have a bottle of that and I'll have a bottle of that. After about 20 minutes, I am absolutely gone. Right? I've lost it. And Jules Holland comes up and says, do you know, if you told us you were going to do that, we would have let you do it, I said, and I'm not going to, because Billy's there, I'm not going to swear, but I give him a right mouthful. And then Paula Yates came up behind him and said, you can't talk to him like that. And I said, and you can, and I give her a bigger mouthful than I'd just given him. Upon which 2 big security guards came along, one either side, and threw me out on the pavement outside. That was the end of my Tube appearance. Because of that Tube appearance, though, everybody wanted to know, what did you say? What did you say? So Decca Records, London Records, so the Redskins were put a press release out, and we got 10 times more publicity because of them cutting the sound off than we ever. Now that was one of the positive things to come out of the strike. There wasn't many of them. Generally speaking, the media were against us from day one all the way through. I do remember Spitting Image. Remember Spitting Image? And there was a picket throwing himself into a policeman's truncheon. I do remember. I don't know if I've just got that disjointed out, but I can see this little bloke, this little picket, throwing himself into the policeman's truncheon. So the media were against us. But there was nothing we could do about that. You cannot make the media. The other thing I want to say is the Sun. Great. They decided to put a picture of Arthur Scargill on the front page of the Sun with his hand like that, implying he's a Nazi salute, and Mein Führer they're going to put under it. And the print workers union said, no, you're not doing it. We're refusing to, and the print workers refused to actually put that picture out. That's one of the positive things that came out of the strike as well. So we did have a lot of support from the ordinary people of this country. And like I said earlier on, 30 years, it doesn't seem like 30 years ago, to be honest with you. But when I look in the mirror and then I look at all these pictures I've been dragged out now, somebody phoned me up the other night and said, Norman, you're on the front page of the Evening Chronicle. I said, oh, what again? He said, no, he said, there's a 30th anniversary, pull-out issue, and you're right on the front page. And he sent me a copy down. And I've never seen that photo before. And I had a homemade banner. Yeah, it had victory at the miners, fight for coal, or sign the dole. And hey, that was, I made that up myself, this was before anybody else. Fight for coal, or sign the dole. Victory at the miners, support the strike. And I'm stood there with my hand up like this. I didn't know what I'm doing with my hand up like that. I'm probably trying to stop somebody. So that's my contribution about the media. But generally speaking, they were against us, but there were moments when we did manage to get through, which I've already told you about. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm debating with Rose whether she wants to speak or whether she wants to be in and answer questions. Speak. Okay, Rose, you've been...
I mean, the only thing I'll say about the media is when you're in struggle, any section of the working class, anybody that's in struggle, they're part of the state machine. And when that state machine turns against you, you've got your media, you've got the army, you've got the police, you've got everything. And that's what we do. So as long as, I didn't expect that in the strike, I was dead naive. I didn't think that was going to happen to me. I didn't think it was going to happen to us, because I could just see us, salt of the earth, miners' families, going out on strike. Everyone will support us. What's not to support? Fighting for your community and for your jobs. But bloody hell, we weren't that far in when we seen the turn. And I didn't have a telly in the strike, and I thank God we didn't. 10 shilling a week, no, not 10 shilling, 50 pence a week we paid to radio rentals, and it went back because we couldn't afford it. But I'm glad we didn't have a telly in the strike, because it would have cracked me up, because it was just so horrible. And I can remember watching Orgreave, and I thought, they're all lads there, and what's happening here? And you could see, you watch the pictures. Now, I couldn't see at the time, but you see the pictures now and how they were lined up against them. It was like, flaming hell, we've just come out on strike to just fight for his jobs, and look. So it didn't take us long, really, to grasp what was happening. So all activists, especially the young ones out there, just put that in your head, because you'll get leathered, you'll get bad press, and if you're a woman, God help you, because if you're a woman, if you're active and you're a woman, you're a bad mum. You shouldn't have kids. You shouldn't be going out. I can remember going to Belfast after the strike, and we got arrested coming back at the airport for not signing the. It's Paul, isn't it?
Yeah, same thing happened to me.
For not signing the green card, and I'm like, well, the elders, they put us in a cell. They did all sorts of things, not bad things, because we just kept singing, and I think that really got on the nerves. And then they let us go. But then you're thinking you're just fighting for what you think's right. So as long as you know, as long as you're prepared, as long as you've got that in mind, and you don't go into things blindly like I did, you'll be all right. Just expect the worst, because you're going to bloody get it, especially if you're a woman.
Just before Paul comes in, I just want to say there was an alternative press. I was a journalist on Socialist Worker through the strike. There were a number of other left-wing papers. Behind you, these pictures are taken by photographers who absolutely consciously stood on the side of the miners rather than behind the police lines. And in the early days, some of them got quite a doing over, because, as you've gathered from the people who've spoken so far, the way the media treated the miners responded with real venom against the photographers, against the camera crew, because they were being lied about day in, day out, hour in, hour out. And it took a little while for the left journalists and the left-wing photographers to be recognised, but very quickly those photographers and journalists were protected rather than rather than attack. But you could get the sense of the bitterness that was going on, and it really mattered. It really mattered because this was a time where the reporting, you didn't. I'll leave it, maybe I'm pinching what Paul's going to say, but it really mattered because you didn't have camera phones, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the ability to get your message out. So actually, people wanted the truth to come out, and that if people saw what was really going on in the strike, on the picket lines, in the communities, and the behaviour of the police, then they will get support, and that was absolutely distorted. I think in many ways it's easier today, but it was very, very difficult back then. Anyway, so I'm going to bring in Paul, and then we'll chuck it open to discussion.
Right, thanks, Mike. I was going to talk a bit. While I'm speaking, you'll probably see me in one of these photographs looking like a scab, but I can explain that. But at least it shows that I was there. I was an activist during the strike, and in fact, what it is that I organised the Kent miners' wives. I was the person who organised, i.e., with the cops, the Kent miners' wives demo in Colville. And then when they got there was only one bloke in a donkey jacket with a working class accent. And they assumed that I was a scab. Anyway, so look, what I think we need to try and understand, if we're going to take take any of the lessons away for now, is how ideology works and what the media's role in it is. And you're getting a great example of that with the police right now. So if you watch Line of Duty, right, which is a drama series, a fantastic drama series. I think it's on BBC, isn't it? BBC. Line of Duty, all the cops are bent, right? They're all corrupt, and even the ones who are good are terribly flawed. They've all done something wrong. That's what the general thing is. Right, then, like 2 hours before, you watch the news bulletin about what's just happened about Stephen Lawrence, right? Only some of the cops are bent. In fact, not many. In fact, they've all retired. It's all fine. We're very sorry. Okay. And then the way the news reports it is that they have to take as read the beginning as the starting point, the official line. So that the Met Police Commissioner comes on. He says, "We're very sorry. We don't think it's still happening. We can't tell you all the details." Blah blah blah. So, look, it's not as if the BBC, which shows both those programs, is the media. But where it matters is the news. Okay, so and I'd add that what's brilliant now is, of course, you've got lots of independent media and you've got lots of other ways of getting. You go into any theatre in London, probably in other parts of Britain. All you get is oppositional stuff that says the world is terrible, it needs to be changed. But the news, why? Now, I have got some notes I was looking at, so I'm not going to do texting. I've got a few notes what I was trying to talk about. Okay, going back to then, I think first of all, there were, as I remember it, I was an activist, I wasn't a journalist at the time. There were two kinds of ideology going on. And one I would call normal, the normal reaction of the media, which I think we can explain, and the other is abnormal, and that concerns above all Murduch. Now, the normal thing, I think the first thing we have to remember is that there'd been 40 years of political consensus between left and right around economic policy, around the way you handle strikes. I remember I was on the Hatfields picket in Sheffield in the steel strike when the first riot shields came out, and you could the shock among people who were Marxist-Leninists was palpable. So what the steel workers must have felt, I don't know. So there was Thatcherism brought in other words, a way of dealing with class struggle that was completely different than the way, even under, say, the Winter of Discontent. You watch the pictures of Winter of Discontent, it's like this, push up. Yeah? So, and then, of course, she was going to smash the miners. She was going to smash the miners, smash the printers, and open the media up to Murdoch. Now, I've spent a bit of time, I worked for the BBC for 12 years, and I worked for Channel 4. Before that, with Mike, I was in the kind of business press. And I spent a lot of time talking to people about what they think they were doing during that. One thing that comes out absolutely clearly is that, right, you will know that the media at the time wasn't all, as it is now, Oxbridge graduates. right? You can't get into the BBC unless you're an Oxbridge graduate. Ditto the Times. Ditto actually the Mirror. You know, the Sun. The Sun's political editor is tough with a kind of Oxbridge background. Okay, then it was what we call Labour aristocratic working class people who ran the media. A lot of them. I mean, all camera people. Most camera people are cameramen. Even now, all cameramen are Labour aristocrats, like the ETPU guys who scabbed on the printer strike. And I've talked to a lot of them, and the ones who were there, and they all said, I went there, they hated my guts. That's what they felt. I got spat on, I got beaten from day one. And you try and say why, and in other words, there was a cultural antipathy first of all before we go anywhere near what Murduch did and what the scabby leadership of all these papers did. There was a cultural antipathy for the same reason that loads of working class people voted Tory in 1983, and the same reason they didn't come out on strike when called was the same reason all these people dotted around, some of the industrial correspondents, some of the printers, etc., didn't do what they should have done. So that's the first. I think we have to be honest about that. But then the next thing is, what were the editors of papers doing? I think it's interesting actually. You look at Orgreave. Obviously, what's happened since is that there's been a freedom of information request, and they've got as much as they can out of the BBC about what they did after Orgreave, on the night. The next morning, they had a meeting saying the bulletin was biased. But they actually had a meeting, and they recognised it, and people inside, like Nick Jones, who was a radio correspondent, were saying this was biased. We outstandingly distorted the truth. The problem is, of course, that there was no redress. We only have redress 30 years later, and they didn't do anything. They didn't feel under any pressure to do anything about that. I mean, one of the legacies of it is that it's drummed into you from day one now that in any situation, not only public order situation, any moving situation that is controversial, it is certainly within the BBC against the rules to place one picture before another if it didn't happen chronologically in time. It's like I occasionally have to kind of grab people and say, "Don't you realise why we do this?" But it's that's one legacy of it. But it wasn't just the cut and splice job that they did. It was the whole tenor of the miners, of violence, etc. I think so. The normal ideology was that the newspapers like the Mirror, very ambivalent about the strike. Whatever they say now, what individual people like Routledge, very good, but the Mirror itself, very ambivalent. Because why? Because Neil Kinnock was ambivalent. Because Norman Willis was ambivalent. Because the car workers had been smashed in '83, etc. Okay. So, but then we have the abnormal ideology, and I think we understand really well now what happened with Murdoch. He goes into Chequers in 1981, he has a private meeting with Thatcher and the person who will make the decision on taking over the Times. Lo and behold, straight after that, he takes over the Times, and all objections, it broke the law because of the amount of media monopoly it created, but all objections are removed. Lo and behold, then, the Sun leads the onslaught that pumps out millions of newspapers every day in a time when for the young people there's no alternative media. These photographs were never seen, except in things like the Newsline, or Socialist Worker, which didn't have great readerships at the time. So they pump out this kind of stuff, and then at the end they attack the printers, and attacking the printers brought the miners' strike into this city. It brought the miners' strike into metropolitan Britain. So all those blokes have been sitting there going, it can never change, they'll never beat us. You know what the printers were like, the cigars and the sheepskin coats. It was suddenly they had the same shock as you had. Bang, it's gone. And gone. You remember Murdoch's people walked into the Times and said, "What do you do? What do you do? What do you do?" And if you couldn't come up with an answer, they said, "You're gone." That was how it worked. We understand now what Murdoch does. There's a sociologist called Manuel Castells, who's a Spanish sociologist, who's described it very well. He creates a switch everywhere, a switch. So you create a group of right-wing voters around a set of ideological ideas that they may not have had beforehand. Everything in the USA, from kind of Christian fundamentalism to crazy ideas about Russia or whatever, you create them through your media thing. That's your audience. And then you are the switch between them and politicians who need their vote. And what you do is that in order to deliver the vote, you get special favours from those politicians. That is what Murdoch's empire does in Australia, in America, here. And that's what I call the special ideological impact, because that's what was going on there. I think that group of right-wing voters had hardly been created. There was kind of people were sick a little bit when people saw what happened in the Falklands, and people came back saying, call off the rail strike or we'll call in an air strike. That's me there. There was a sickness then, but it wouldn't. 10 years later, after 10 years of this relentless, propaganda from the Sun, that was what we were doing. That's what you ended up with. Now, the Zeke Hall front page is a great. The Mein Führer front page. It was I can't remember which section of it was on the Sun who stopped it. But for those who don't know, they only stopped it. It forced the Sun to go out with a blank white front page, which said the chapel of the whatever it was, Sogat, will not set this page, and therefore we're printing it without. That's the level of warfare we were up against. Other things to remember: the drift back to work was an ideologically constructed thing. Of course, there was a drift back to work, but there was also a strike. There was a strike, and what is more, there was NACODs at one point nearly came out. The Dockers nearly came out. There was no reporting of the Dockers are out. There was only the reporting of the drift back to work. There were fewer people drifting back to work, certainly in the autumn, winter, than there were taking new initiatives in favour of the strike. So it was pure. It's just pure ideology. The tragedy is the Labour movement didn't have a vehicle. I mean, the Miner. You see some of these pictures. The Miners selling the paper, the Miner, trying to sell them to scabs. I mean, that probably is something we can learn. That we need the Labour movement. I'm an NUJ activist. I've been ever since I've been a journalist. We need a way of communicating to the outside world. And the other final thing is. There's an untold story that I think even now we ought to, Northern Ireland. We're still picking over Northern Ireland. Who did what? You mentioned Bloody Sunday. There's extrajudicial killings. The actual murders of people by terrorist groups are still being, who did what? Now, if you're going to have a truth and reconciliation, because I'd like to get Labour movement activists in a position of almost truth and reconciliation with my mates who didn't live through this, who don't understand why you're so angry about it, who want to be in the media. They want to, with pride, stand up and say, I work for the ITN or the BBC or Channel 4, whatever. So the truth should come out. One thing is, the BBC will say, we've got no money to do this. Fair enough, they haven't. But I bet there's a media studies department somewhere that could say, we will take all the documentation off your hands. Every script, I know the scripts are all there in a big vat, every script, every bulletin, we'll go and we'll take it. Granville Williams does some of this, but I think that, getting to the truth of why the decisions were taken would be one thing, inside the Beeb. And then the other thing is, I think the untold story, the absolutely untold story, and somebody's pointed this out, I covered this year the 30-year rule release of the documents. There's all the missing bit of it. I mean, it's comprehensive. There's nothing missing. The only missing bit of it is David Hart, the secret, organisation out of Claridge's to run the strike from the working miners' point of view, and then the security service. And I think it is time, really, to ask the question: when are we going to find out what MI5 did during the miners' strike? Because I think, in terms of we're going around preaching in the world about the rule of law, and since becoming a journalist, I've become very attached to the idea of the rule of law, because you see what happens when in places where it doesn't run, Ukraine, Russia, etc. But if the rule of law is going to be upheld in this country, you do want to know whether or not the entire weight of the security service was in fact deployed against the miners, and therefore then we get to the bottom of were there cops, were there army dressed up as cops. I've never seen any evidence, any absolute concrete evidence that there were. Tony Benn says he saw it, blah blah blah. A lot of people thought it was happening. So I think a kind of truth commission that says that covers those two things. What did the state media do, and what did the security service do? Would be, I think it'd be a positive thing. You know, the strike, as you say, is gone. It was smashed. I'm from Lee in Lancashire. The social, fabric of my town has been, to put it politely, messed up. Badly. So let's have some. The battle for the truth is not over, I think.